Welcome back. This will be the last of our weekly videos. I apologize that this is coming a day later than I would have liked. Yesterday got away from me. I had student and departmental meetings, it seems like from 10 in the morning until well into the evening. Got home about 1 a.m. this morning. Where I'd like to start today is reviewing what we've done over the last 7 weeks. Where have we been? The first couple of weeks we were really thinking about teaching and learning in a more theoretical way. We were thinking about how knowledge is constructed. We were thinking about how that's relevant to different theories of teaching, touching on behaviorism, touching on constructivism. We thought through Bloom's taxonomy and variations on that taxonomy and how those might help us to align what we do in the classroom, what we do when we prepare our syllabi, when we think about units and assignments and activities, and how we might connect that with the learning goals that we've established for our students. And we thought in those first couple of weeks about memory, how memory works, since that's so vital and fundamental to learning. To learn something, we have to be able to remember it. So we were thinking about how memory works. We also thought quite a bit about the things that get in the way of learning. We were really just trying to lay a foundation there. Following Bloom's taxonomy, in fact, we were trying to create a foundation of knowledge that we could then build on and apply. And in the weeks since then, we've been looking at particular elements of teaching. We started by thinking about rapport. How do we build rapport with our students? How do we create an environment in which they are most likely to be able to learn? How do we establish very early on that we want our students to learn, that we're there to help, to guide them, and that we're also asking them to be a part of their own learning process, to be fully engaged. We're then thinking about how do we deliver a lesson. We talked about small teaching, breaking up lessons into its smaller parts. We talked about storytelling and how that can be such a useful way of not only conveying information, but really getting students imaginatively involved in the skill or topic that we're addressing. It was with lesson planning that we first introduced the idea of backwards design. Backwards design, of course, has become a through line, a theme for the course. Whether we're talking about lesson design or syllabus design or assignment design, we do want to consider where we end up, what the end goal is that we're actually trying to achieve in terms of our student learning. How we'll know if they've achieved that. What kind of assessments do we need to have students demonstrate their mastery? And then from there, what kinds of assignments, what kinds of activities, what kinds of lecturing, what kinds of base knowledge do students need so that we can scaffold that journey from where they are to where we want them to be. So after we thought about how do we deliver lessons, and we had a chance with our micro teachers to try that out a couple of times, we moved on to thinking about active learning. How do we get students really involved in that learning process? The more we push towards the higher end of Bloom's taxonomies, when we think about analysis and creation, we really need students to have those opportunities to be hands-on, to engage the material in ways that often simulate what they're going to have to do with that material, whether it's in a job, whether it's in future classes, with further development. From there we thought about assignment design. How do we create assignments that are leading the way to those learning goals that we have for our students? And we talked about syllabus design. How do we design a course as a whole? the modules, the units, the week-to-week and day-to-day activities that will scaffold the journey of our students. And finally, after thinking about course design, assignment design, active learning, rapport, all of those things, we thought about assessments, we thought about feedback. And last week we were thinking specifically about formative and summative feedback. The kind of formal and informal kinds of feedback, formative feedback, that is really meant to help students understand where they are in the process, what they're getting, what they're not getting, helps them to evaluate for themselves their progress in many cases, or that just gives us information so that we can better adapt to the progress that students are making. And we talked about summative feedback, grades, scores on major exams, thinking at least a little bit about how we can shape those in ways that help students to treat those as stepping stones to even larger chunks of understanding, of skills, etc. So that's where we've been to this point. And now we're wrapping things up. This week is really about the production of the teaching portfolio as a whole. That will be the major assignment. But it's also our week to be reflective. A number of the smaller discussions and assignments are really about that reflectiveness. What is it, for instance, that our discipline has to teach? Now, of course, most of us have been involved in our disciplines for long enough that we just take it for granted. We know what our discipline has to teach. But I think if we step back and try to articulate that in a concise, thoughtful way, it may help us with things like overcoming the gap of knowledge between ourselves and our students. Do we have ways of expressing to our students precisely what it is that we think our discipline will offer to them and that they can gain from engaging fully with the material that we have? We want to think about our own teaching. What's important to us about that teaching? I want us to ask about where we go from here. Hopefully something in the last 7 weeks has helped you to rethink some element of your teaching, or confirm something that you're already doing, or think about a weakness that you want to strengthen, or maybe it introduced you to material that you're unfamiliar with at all. Whatever the case, I hope that it is a springboard to an ongoing process. I think all of us can improve upon our teaching, and we do that by being conscientious of what we're doing and thinking about alternatives to what we're doing that may improve how we adapt to, how we help, how we shepherd our students in their learning process. So those are the things that I think in the background we want to be thinking about and discussing and writing about this week. The two major assignments that we're engaged in this week is a final revision of our teaching philosophy. Think of this as the narrative of your teaching, only it's the abstract version. It's the short story version. Yes, you're going to have to be concise, and we've set that limit at 500 words because that is, at least in the North American Academy, the most traditional length, about a page, for something like a teaching philosophy that would show up in a teaching portfolio, that would show up on a web page for students. You will have to prioritize and try to convey to your reader what you see as most important about your teaching. This does not need to be, I am the greatest teacher ever. For most of us, that's not entirely believable. Instead, we want to be pointing out what is essential to our thinking about teaching, what we try to do and what we think we do most effectively, But it's also worth including what you're working on, what you're improving upon, to give our readers a sense of that ongoing development as a teacher. The other big assignment is, of course, the teaching portfolio. And it will start with a copy of your teaching philosophy, so you don't need to redo that, but it will be included as part of the teaching portfolio overall. The teaching portfolio is meant to bring together all of the elements and others that you want to include that fleshes out that story of your teaching. So there are 5 required elements of the teaching portfolio that you need to have in it. And these are the things that we've been doing throughout the last 7 weeks. So you need to have the teaching philosophy. You need to have a teaching plan, that is a lesson plan. You need a sample active learning activity. You need an assignment. And you need a sample syllabus. Those are the required elements to it. So to do this, I highly recommend you go back to what you submitted as your portfolio items, whether you got peer responses to it, whether you got tutor responses to it. Think about what responses you may have gotten, but also think about the things that we have discussed since you did those write-ups, and revise them with those things in mind. So you're not producing a lot of new material this week, but you are going back and rethinking and revising that material for your portfolio. I do recommend that you have head notes for each of those items in a very short couple of sentences or a short paragraph. Try to describe for your reader how this element illustrates something essential about your teaching, something that's important to you about your teaching. So it puts the raw materials in a context, in a framework for your reader. On top of the required elements, you are welcome to include anything else that you think is important to your field or to that narrative of who you are as a teacher. For many of you, you may have a lot of student feedback that you want to share with your reader. And that's great. That's often part of a teaching portfolio. Maybe you have additional activities, you have different additional lessons that you want to share with your reader, or a sample of a number of syllabi. While we have put a word limit on it simply to help the tutors read through everything in the week after you submit it, feel free to have your version and the version you submit. That is, your version might be much longer and include all the things that you think are really essential to fully fleshing out your version of what it means to be a teacher, and then a trimmed down version for the submission. So here we are at the end. This is the last of the weekly videos. I've really appreciated all of the discussions, the forum discussions, the questions, the feedback on things that we can improve upon. I really appreciate that. Thank you for participating. Thank you for really developing that environment that I think many of you have expressed such appreciation for in terms of that support that you've given to each other. Now, I have promised you a bibliography. I am sorry that because it's the waning days of our semester here that it seems like every time I turn to it I've gotten distracted. But this afternoon I will get the bibliography out to you so that we can be adding to that over the next week and have that as a resource for all of us. I hope you continue to think carefully about your teaching and share that with your colleagues, share that with those around you. I look forward to being with you for one more week on the forums, and good luck.